to what could be called the climate cause, environmental questions.
So I thought it was quite fascinating to see an Arctic region which has a population that and lives in it and with it, and that is more the hope. That gives me hope in that sense that it's not all that it doesn't have to be negative. Everything that we're seeing and we're talking about these days and these years.
They do so much for our children, bringing it up, but also in a fun way, seeing the whole picture of things.
So there's a delay in the system. So what we're seeing now, a lot of the warming we're seeing now is actually because of what we emitted 30 years ago and before. So there's a lag in the system, which makes it very difficult to make the right decisions at the right time.
I will not underestimate the magnitude of the task ahead of us all. Developing countries must grow less carbon intensive, and industrialized countries must cut emissions by at least 80% by year 2050. That is drastic, and that will indeed require careful planning. It is, however, definitely possible without sacrificing prosperity. Denmark is a living proof of that.
As we move forward with negotiations this week in Copenhagen, these measures and the promise of many more to come should serve as a crystal clear signal that the United States is serious about fighting climate change.
I don't think we have too much time, because as we had clearly brought out in the fourth assessment report of the IPCC, if we have to stabilize our temperature increase to between 2 to 2.4 degrees Celsius, then global greenhouse gas emissions must peak no later than 2015. And that's very, very close. And that's why I think an exhibition of this kind, where you're not just emphasizing green, but bright green, because I think this is where the brightness of the human race lies. We have been through major revolutions in our activities in the past. We started as hunter-gatherers, we then found agriculture, and then came the Industrial Revolution, largely driven by the invention of the steam engine. And I think we went on a spree, producing more and more goods and services, consuming more and more fossil fuels, and now we know with complete reliance that what we have done is to have affected the climate of this globe in a manner and with an inertia that if we don't bring about major change, then clearly we are going to have impacts that may occur in other parts of the world far worse than this region, but they will leave no part of the globe untouched.
Well, a question which is often faced by many of the delegates who attend an international climate conference is what do you do in the middle weekend? And here in Denmark, what they've done is organise this exhibition called Bright Green, where we have more than 200 delegates from throughout the world bringing new technologies to demonstrate what successes are available now to help deal with climate change. The Danish Prime Minister attended the event early this morning, and he made a very interesting observation. His upbeat tone was a surprise. Most of the world's news media have been telling us that there's not going to be agreement here in Copenhagen, and yet the Prime Minister was extremely optimistic. If there is an agreement at the end of this week, with more than 180 heads of state attending, it looks likely, and if there is an agreement, that's not an end to the process. It's actually just the beginning, because what's needed is new technologies to help us to deliver the kind of solutions that are required. And events like this will become more common, demonstrating what can be done. So, an agreement on COP15 at the end of this week is only the start of the process. So maybe midweek is a good time to take a pause in the considerations of how we're going to manage climate change and really reflect on what this means for communications. I think there's a number of key things which have come across in the last few days which will leave an indelible mark on me in terms of looking at COP15. Clearly, there's a lot of communications that needs to be done. And the irony of what's been going on here, this city of 1,000 peddled vested interests in the circus of climate change, is the fact that we must learn from each other. Because one thing that has really struck home this week is a clear understanding that we're all on this together. Planet Earth is struggling to cope with the climate change that's happening, and unless we work together as a group of people, we will not deliver the solutions that's required. The protesters have been here on force with all the different angles that they want to take, and one of the key things that they've done is demonstrated the simplicity of message is the thing which people will remember. Good imagery, clarity of purpose in terms of what they're expecting people to do. And we could learn a lot from the protesters in the business world in terms of the way they communicate on environmental issues. But looking forward, there's also something equally important in terms of communicating in the opposite direction. Because the reality is that even if Obama and the rest of them sign the treaty at the end of this coming week, that starting gun is the beginning of the change, our ability to deal with climate change. And the delivery of new technologies means that all of us have to have a view about what climate means. And that's where good communications comes in. And the key thing for us is that after 20 years of working in environmental communications, we decided this was the ideal place to start the battle of trying to communicate effectively, to engage with audiences, to get them to understand where we are coming from in terms of our attitude towards this fundamentally important issue. The answer is definitely blowing in the wind, and behind our little mermaid here, we see part of the solution is already with us. We have the technological advances, we need to apply them, but equally importantly, we must take the public with us. Now is the time for us to start communicating effectively on this, the most important issue of all.